Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Jaws, and Scream. What do all of these movies have in common? The answer to that actually isn't as simple as you might think, because there are several qualities that these movies share, and it's not only the classical horror movie genre. But for one, they are all horror movies in the classical sense. They have jump scares, gore, a focus on survival, and a sort of big evil or external enemy, like for example Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, or the Shark, Michael Myers, and all of these are simply classical horror movie killers. Some people might also argue that these horror movies don't have a deeper meaning to them, and no twisted story or anything that really lingers in your mind. They just have the simple formula of there's a killer and people need to survive and not get killed by it. Another thing these movies have in common is that they are all quite old. Each and every one of these movies is from somewhere between 1975 and 1996, which is almost more than 30 years ago now. Now let's take a look at some other movies, some more recent ones. We have Hereditary 2018, Midsommar 2019, or Smile 2022 and 24. These are the most popular and well-known examples I found of another kind of category of horror movies. And again, for the question, what do all of these movies have in common? Well, first of all, there is no clear external monster. Like, for example, in Smile, we have some sort of curse that is transferred to another person by the act of themselves in a gruesome way and making another person watch it, and then the curse is transferred to that other person who watched that person die. In Midsommar, it's a cult. In Hereditary, we do actually have some sort of external force, a demon, which is a pretty classical horror movie creature, I guess. But the focus is more on the emotional core of the story of Hereditary. Which brings us to our biggest difference between the first and second category, the point of the movie and the main theme. What do the people who made this movie want to cause in the viewer? What kind of feelings and emotions? There are, of course, major exceptions to this, but I have noticed a pattern over the last few years. Modern horror movies seem to oftentimes focus more on the psychological themes of a movie, mostly trauma. Instead of villains or clear external monsters, we get a tangled mess of a threat that oftentimes aims to emotionally devastate us instead of simply scare us. After watching this kind of movie for the weeks or days to come, you might not feel simply scared, but instead deeply devastated and emotionally disturbed. And the thing is, there have always been horror movies with a major theme of trauma that simply make you feel disturbed when you even think about them, like for example The Human Centipede is a big one, or The Shining. But recently, I think there has been a rise in those kinds of movies. The ones specifically centered around normal, everyday experiences that are tragic. For example, childhood trauma, or losing a loved one, or family issues. Smile, for example, is based on the trauma of seeing someone else unalive themselves in front of you. But the question kind of is, why do people even watch that when it's so deeply disturbing to a lot of them? Why on earth would we be submitting ourselves to a sort of mental torture? A lot of us probably understand the phenomenon of watching a typical scary movie and anticipating the jump scares, or simply making fun of the quality of the movie with your friends, and that can be fun. But this doesn't explain watching traumatizing movies. Why do we want to be disturbed, and why is this happening now in recent years, and wasn't as popular as it was back in the day? Let's start with the first question. What makes us watch trauma-based movies? Some of you might have already heard about this, but there is a theory called the catharsis theory by Aristotle. The fuck is Aristotle? Anyway, some of you might have already heard about this, but there is a theory called the catharsis theory created by Aristotle. To quote him, amongst other things, he stated, "Tragedy is an imitation, not of men, but of an action and of life, of happiness and misery. Its function is to arouse the emotions of pity and fear, and by means of them to bring about the catharsis of such emotions." So, to make you understand this better, catharsis is basically a state of emotional release and purification. That is basically the goal in Aristotle's mind of consuming media. In his time, that was the theater. He describes it as the tragedy, the tragedy that is depicted in the theater. For us, it'd be horror movies or any other kind of media, a book or whatever. And what he's trying to say here is that by imitating real tragedy in the theater or with movies, the viewer feels pity and fear, and by the end of a movie or play, will have experienced heavy emotions too intense to face in real life in the safety of a cinema. So that means that we are releasing emotions in the cinema, making them easier to face in real life, or they are freeing us of these fears. At least that's how I see it. And that does kind of sound a bit contradictory, to be honest. Like, I don't usually feel less scared of losing someone after watching a movie about someone losing a loved one. For me, it's more an intensified fear because it becomes more real. And what Aristotle is trying to say here, I would say, is probably more about releasing emotions than it is about getting over them, which is pretty much impossible. Hey guys, quick advertisement. So I just dropped the book. Yes, I just randomly dropped the book. It's not really a book, it's really short, but oh Jesus Christ. But yeah, it's about a girl who is in denial about having killed her brother, and then throughout therapy sessions, she figures out that it was actually her. It includes difficult family dynamics, childhood trauma, well, it's a mystery, so murder. If you want to buy it, the link is in the description. I know it's pretty expensive, 18 euros, but it was really fun writing this. I submitted it for a contest. I just wanted to make a quick advertisement because it just arrived today, so yeah, go buy it if you want to. And there's another theory by none other than our good friend Freud. Yes, a very controversial figure with lots of interesting takes, but let's get into his opinion on this topic. In his 1919 essay Das Unheimliche, he states that familiar but strange things unsettle us, like dolls, ghosts, or doubles, because they hint at repressed childhood memories or fears. He claims that we push disturbing fears and fantasies into our unconscious, and horror movies apparently give us a way to safely make them return. So while Aristotle sees horror as something healing, Freud claims that it simply reveals our darkest fantasies and memories. Another take on this comes from Colton Scrivern from the University of Chicago 2020. Similar to Aristotle, he claims that we can mentally rehearse experiences like losing a loved one or facing our trauma in a safe environment. It's a safe kind of danger. And this actually borders on the general concept of exposure therapy. PTSD patients, for example, are exposed to their fears and trauma in therapy. And horror is a controlled environment as well, where you're confronted with painful experiences that you might not have had, but you might be scared of them. And contrary to other genres, horror faces difficult topics head on, like really head on, sometimes in a very detailed and graphic way, most of the time actually. And one of those is death. As we all know, death is a very common fear and very normal, especially when you're young. I mean, we've talked about death before on this channel, but by the way, I have like a whole video on the fear of dying and aging, so if you want to watch that, it's called The Psychology of Crying on Your Birthday. What I basically said in there is that the fear of death is normal when you are young, but it usually lessens when you age. But the point is that the fear of death is very present in our lives, in most of our lives, and it makes sense that through horror we want to face it, and we are directly faced with it and exposed to it through horror in a very graphic way, which can then in turn lead to the positive effects that I mentioned in this video. But now that we've theorized about why we are drawn to watching disturbing movies, let's get into the changes in the recent years. I think a big factor here is the falling stigma around mental health in general. It has become much more common to talk about mental illnesses or mental health struggles in general, and the film industry obviously closely watches those changes and then adapts to them. Mental health is currently a big topic. It has always been present in our lives and in society, but we're much more open to it now, and the film industry, as I said, reacts to this. And now for the end of the video, I want to give my opinion on this real quick. I actually used to be quite obsessed with horror movies back in the day when I was 13 to 15, and I used to watch them regularly, actually once a week with my aunt. Back then, it was kind of more of a coping mechanism for me, as a means to escape reality, or simply to just kind of feel better about myself, because it was something that's forbidden when you're under 16. But to be honest, I stopped watching them about a year ago when I first saw that episode of Black Mirror about that man who is sort of in this simulation, and then he is in another simulation. It just keeps going, and it's sort of like really distorts your perception of reality. And then he loses his memories, and that was just very deeply disturbing to me, so I just decided to never watch anything like that again, especially not psychological horror. And the thing is, most recent movies are about psychological horror. Like, I watched the Smile 2 in the cinema about a year ago in Paris. I also watched it in 4D, so that was definitely a mistake, but I had to leave before the finale of the movie because I was just not prepared at all. And the thing about psychological horror movies is that they can actually have long-lasting negative effects on you. They can actually theoretically traumatize you. So even if for some of us they might have the capacity to be beneficial and have positive effects on us, like the ones we talked about, I think more often than not horror affects us in a negative way, because both can be true at the same time. Horror might be unconsciously helpful for you to face your fears or release repressed emotions, but it can also at the same time deeply disturb you and leave you with a disordered perception of reality and new fears. So I personally will not be watching a horror movie anytime soon. Alright, that was it for the video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. This was kind of a more intense one, so if you want to watch something that's more fun, you might want to click on either the next or the video I posted before that, because I'm filming 2 videos back to back, so yeah, whatever. If you like the video, leave a like please. If you like the channel, subscribe. We are almost at 500 subscribers, so it'd be really great if we were able to hit that anytime soon. Comment your opinion on horror movies and what you have experienced, if they help you or make you feel bad in a way. Probably the latter, but whatever. Tell me what you think, and yeah, see you in the next video. Bye!